Today, we are going to talk about taking initiative, and this is the masculine discipline of moving first. What we're going to look at, real quick, when we talk about masculinity, I threw down with the definition on day 19 of godly masculinity for Christian men, has four parts, looking at adventure and mastery and service and pursuit. And so, what I want to talk about today with taking initiative is going to focus on the pursuit side of things. And pursuit, within the umbrella of pursuit, is the concept of taking initiative. And without taking initiative, pursuit doesn't happen. When you pursue the woman, when you pursue your dreams, when you pursue your ideal job, when you pursue your children, when you pursue anything, your fitness goals, like whatever it is, as the man, you take initiative and you pursue that thing. And there are relationships I have in my life, friendships that will not exist. They would not exist if I did not initiate and pursue them. And at the end of the day, I know that when I spend time with my friend, they don't really invite me to very many things. But when we're hanging out together, we love each other's company. And sometimes I'm like, man, this sucks. Like, this guy doesn't invite me to stuff. He must not like me. And I'm like, nope, that's not a true statement. That's an insecure statement. What is real is that he just isn't tapped into his masculinity in terms of pursuit. And so he doesn't initiate and take initiative. But when we're together, and when I pursue him in friendship and take initiative, then we have a wonderful time and we go on adventures together. We do the things. So without initiative, I would argue that the other components of masculinity fall apart. Adventure stalls, mastery decays, service, it doesn't even start without taking initiative. And so while it is something that is central to pursuit, it also is kind of a hinge for the rest of masculinity, which is why I want to give it its own class today. This is a 2.5 minute funny video that I want us to watch. If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now, here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now, here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. Three is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come two more people, then three more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in. All right, that's madness. But there's, I think, a masterclass contained in that about leadership, and his own philosophy at the end. We don't all need to be leaders. Okay, maybe, maybe not. But the point is, we saw both the first shirtless guy and then the first follower. Both of them were people that took initiative. And so, what we're going to talk about are different outcomes of initiative. And let's just jump in. So first up is being responsible. Taking initiative is bearing the responsibility for something before you're asked to. And so responsibility, being responsible, it means to have ownership of an outcome. And masculinity that pursues taking initiative looks like you don't wait for permission, you take action. And the master level of this is foreseeing it, anticipating needs, and taking action. Where it's immature to wait for someone to tell you what to do. It is mature masculinity when you identify a gap and you fill the need, you meet the need. If you find yourself as always reacting, then you are probably already behind. Then the second thing about taking initiative is the willingness to be wrong in public, because taking initiative, it requires the courage to act with uncertainty. If you are waiting for certainty, one, that's usually just fear in disguise, and two, it's showing like, hey, I'm not willing to be wrong, which is okay if that's where you're at. But the point is that leaders, they try to make the best decision with the most information, but they know even if I don't have perfect information, I'm still going to take action. And at the end of the day, indecision feels safe, but it usually produces regret, which we'll look at regret here in a minute. Then momentum. You guys have probably heard the saying, fortune favors the bold. I would argue that momentum favors the bold. Momentum favors the man who takes initiative, who moves first, and what we just looked at, who moves first with imperfect information or incomplete information, but still takes action. And if you are stuck, if you're paralyzed in stillness, then that will make your fear magnify. But when you take action, and you are creating the momentum, motion or forward movement is what gives you feedback and helps you course correct and really dial in your direction. We hear people say action creates clarity. I agree with that. And we talked about physiological self control before, and you can act your way into courage. And then spiritual authority. We'll look at two things. This is the first. We'll talk about love is not control. That'll be the second. Two things that look at uh, how taking initiative is a biblical thing. And so when we look in scripture, multiple stories where God's authority rests on those who move forward. And this is with Abram, commonly known as Abraham, but God called him to up and leave his home, and God's authority rested on him. We look at Moses when they were trapped up against the Red Sea, and God said, tell the people of Israel to move forward. And as they took forward steps, literally the Red Sea parted for them. We look at David, where he ran toward the battle line to meet Goliath and to kill his enemy. We look at Peter, who decided to get out of the boat and meet Jesus on the water, and he walked on the waves to Jesus. And in all these cases, and in many more biblical examples, we see that God's authority rests on those who take initiative, and it follows obedience. It doesn't follow good intentions. And so, one way you could look at taking initiative is that it is faith in action. And I see many, many, many Christian men who they are waiting on God to move first. They're praying, hey, God, move in my life. And meanwhile, God has already spoken over their life and given them an invitation to obey and to take action, and they aren't. And when they have faith that looks like action, when they take initiative, then the Lord's presence meets them and magnifies what He is doing in their life by the way of His authority resting on them. Then we look at how initiative brings order to chaos. And we see in the Garden of Eden where God tells Adam to manage his garden for him. The garden, I don't think it was a place of perfect order, but I know that that is in the nature of God, is order and beauty. And so initiative, masculine initiative, it brings structure to, it brings order to wherever there's chaos. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And it doesn't mean blessed are the peacekeepers, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And so to make peace inherently requires, it implies that there is something that is out of peace, that is not peaceful. And the sons of God are people that go in and make the peace. And so you see when someone takes initiative, they show up to chaos and they bring structure and order and they establish peace. Left to its own devices, many things in nature experience entropy or decay. And if you leave it unaddressed, then delay it compounds and problems multiply. And initiative stops it. And so if you are walking by something at work and you see trash on the ground, boom, guess what? You are now responsible. When you see something off, have the choice to take initiative and bear responsibility. And picking up trash at your place of work is a minor example. But there's so many things in life where, as soon as you've identified a problem, you now have the choice to say, am I going to take initiative and bear responsibility, or passively ignore it and continue on? And I would encourage you to apply that with wisdom, because if you spend your whole life picking up trash, maybe God has called you to a specific mission and you are going to miss that mission because you have now reverted to janitorial services when the Lord has called you to something different. So apply that with wisdom, but know that taking initiative brings order and structure and peace to chaos. And then this is a big point for us, guys. Initiative looks like love, not control. Godly masculine initiative, it serves and it protects and it creates safety. It does not dominate. It is not overbearing. It does not suffocate others. And you see, this is probably the biggest point for today's teaching, is that love moves first. And the biggest example we have of this is, look at reconciliation. So Adam and Eve, they were in the Garden of Eden and they sinned against God. They ate the forbidden fruit and they realized they were naked and they went and hid. And then the next thing we see in scripture is that God comes looking for them. And so put yourself in God's shoes real quick. God created the earth. He created these people in his image. He gave them this baller garden with anything and everything they could want. He placed them in Genesis 2:11 and 12. He put them in the middle of a context of gold. There wasn't even anything to buy or trade at that time. And he's just lavishing his children made in his image. And then they sinned against him. And if you're in God's shoes, they just disobeyed you, they hurt you, and now your feelings are hurt, and then they ran away and hid. And it's like, instead of God waiting for them to come back and be like, hey, we're so sorry, we hurt you, we disobeyed you, God chased them down and God initiated reconciliation, even though God was the one who was hurt. And so when we look at being a man of God who pursues and takes initiative, this is the biggest point for us, is that godly men, like God did in the Garden of Eden, godly men initiate reconciliation even when we're the ones who were in the right, who got hurt. We go find the person who is in the wrong and we pursue them in love to have reconciliation. And obviously, there's wisdom in this as well. There are times where it would be foolish to go chase down the wrongdoer and try to reconcile. If they don't want it, or if they want to continue to harm you and cross all boundaries, then you apply wisdom and you don't do that. But when you consider the role of a man in his house, one thing I like to say is, in my house, I am the chief of forgiveness. And that is not to that's not to say I'm the chief over God. No, that is not at all what we're talking about. The context is, if there is conflict between my wife and I, or between anyone in my family, I say, I am the man of this house. I am the chief of forgiveness. I dictate conflict resolution. I initiate reconciliation. And then I apply this to not just the chief of forgiveness, but then I say, I am the chief of purity in my house. And I say, I am the chief of strength, and all the things that's like, that is not to dismiss, devalue, or undermine the role of other members in my household. It is simply to acknowledge that I have responsibility and I'm taking initiative for these things like forgiveness. So that's the biggest thing we can take from today, is love moves first. Look at the example of God in the Garden of Eden, that when he was the one that was hurt, he was 100% in the right and someone else wronged him, he still initiated reconciliation and he pursued with love. If you don't do that, then the last point here is that passivity abandons others into uncertainty. When you don't act, you're being very selfish. And you see this also in the Garden of Eden. When the devil came and tempted the woman, Adam stood there silently and did nothing. He abandoned her into uncertainty. He abandoned her and he chose selfishness. And then, personally, in our lives, if you know that there could be conflict that needs to be addressed, or forgiveness that needs to be extended, and you delay those things or you leave them unaddressed, you're practicing passivity. It's the opposite of this whole point that we're talking about, that love moves first. And then, antidote, taking initiative is the antidote to regret. Most men, I think, if you were to take a poll, they rarely feel regret over getting something wrong, compared to not doing something. And so, men that didn't do a thing, they didn't take action, they chose not to have the conversation, they left their words unsaid, they delayed a decision, they didn't take action, they had a conviction burning in their heart and they didn't speak it out. Those men feel regret because they didn't take initiative, versus if you did and then maybe you got a little embarrassed or you got it wrong or you were off a little bit, that is much more that's an easier pill to swallow than dealing with the regret of not taking initiative, of passivity, of inaction. And if you do take initiative, what does it cost you? At worst, it costs you your ego. On the other hand, passivity oftentimes costs you peace. And final point is that leaders act, leaders take initiative, leaders take action. And on the other hand, consensus seekers, they react. Where leaders go first, just like the funny video we watched, they invite others, they give others permission to follow. A consensus seeker is someone that would be waiting for unanimous agreement. And when they do that, they dilute responsibility and they don't take action. And then there are no results achieved. If you're someone that is sitting around waiting for permission, then you are not leading. And when we tie it back into the four components of masculinity, and looking at pursuit, if you're waiting for permission, you're usually not pursuing, you're not taking initiative, you're certainly not leading. And so, review, those are the little bullet points we talked about. Look at those, because two questions to the crowd. The first question is, which principle stood out the most? And the second is, where do you have room to grow? So I'll throw those up again real quick, and then I'll just collapse the slides so I can see your faces and hear from you guys.